Good evening, fellow viewers. This is Mariana, and today we will be discussing the Berlin Crisis, which officially began in 1958 and ended this year towards the end of 1961. The Berlin Crisis was a series of diplomatic and military standoffs between the USSR and the United States, who both rose as superpowers after World War II. They fought over the control of Berlin, which is located deep inside the Soviet sphere. Its main actors include the Soviet Union under Premier Nikita Khrushchev, East Germany, also called the German Democratic Republic, under Walter Ulbricht, West Germany under Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, the United States, whose involvement began under the Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower and concluded under Democrat John F. Kennedy, Great Britain under Prime Minister Harold Macmillan, and France under President Charles de Gaulle. Let us look at a map to further understand the borders. The Berlin Crisis most directly aligns with the historical concept of consequence due to the erection of the Berlin Wall, whose construction portrayed the physical result of post-World War II tensions. So, why exactly does the Berlin Crisis coincide with the concept of consequence? Well, the Berlin Wall, which is a direct result of the Berlin Crisis, did not simply divide the city. It permanently contained East Germans within their own borders, reshaping the European geopolitics of communism and establishing a new global distribution of power under a bipolar world order for decades to come.
Some of the long-term conflicts that sort of led to this event are notably known as the post-World War II division of Germany, which allowed Russia to control most ports and generally all of Berlin due to Berlin being situated deep in their territory. Another thing that led to it was the ideological clash between communism and capitalism, which made it so that they were at odds with each other and found that they needed to one-up or defeat the other in some sort of way. Another thing was the vulnerability of West Berlin. Like as I previously mentioned, West Berlin was deep in Russian territory and thus was essentially under their control. So when the Russians closed off general land access, the only way that West Berlin could receive supplies and resources was through airlifts, which were expensive and tedious. Firstly, the political cartoon suggests that the USSR's greater occupation of Berlin led to an unfair advantage. This is evident in the manner in which Joseph Stalin is seated on top of the table, close to Harry Truman, rather than across from him, which would have insinuated equal standing. Secondly, the political cartoon alludes to the conflict between communism and capitalism. This is evident in the way that only Harry Truman, President of the United States, and Joseph Stalin, leader of the USSR, are depicted. This highlights the ideological clash between world superpowers that happened during the Berlin Crisis.
Short-term causes of the Berlin Crisis. The short-term causes of the Berlin Crisis included the Big Three, including France, determining and disagreeing on how to govern Germany post-World War II. Western allies really wanted a strong economic Germany post-World War II. However, Stalin wanted a weak Germany that still had Soviet influence that he could control. Second short-term cause was the implementation of a new currency within West Germany and West Berlin, known as the Deutsche Mark, if I'm pronouncing that right. And this really angered Stalin and created tensions even higher than they already were. Another short-term cause was the implementation of the Berlin blockade. The Berlin blockade was a plan set by Stalin and was initiated by him, which effectively started the Berlin Crisis.
So, what exactly happened during the Berlin Crisis, you might ask? Let's start with November 10th, 1958. On this date, the USSR's Premier Khrushchev gave a speech demanding the end to the four-power occupation of Berlin. His threat was clear. He would withdraw and turn East Berlin over to East Germany. This was a calculated move to force the Western countries to forfeit their sectors and leave Berlin entirely to the communist East Germans. Khrushchev furthered his agenda through the formal diplomatic notes to France, Britain, and the USA on November 27, 1958, proposing a peace treaty. A draft of the said peace treaty was presented to the Western powers on January 10, 1959, which outlined that all four powers would recognize both German states and the establishment of Berlin as a free city. The USSR's actions grew out of a sense of threat to Soviet security. However, as most of you probably guessed, there was opposition. The US rejected the proposition because they saw it as a means to enforce the integration of Berlin into East Germany. According to President John F. Kennedy, the US cannot and will not permit the communists to drive us out of Berlin either gradually or by force. For the fulfillment of our pledge to that city is essential to the faith of the entire free world. West Germany's Chancellor Konrad Adenauer saw no benefit in a peaceful coexistence and feared that the socialists from East Germany could gain control of West Germany. France supported Adenauer's position. Although Khrushchev sought to persuade the US, his efforts were in vain. More importantly, he faced serious issues at home due to the flow of people from east to west. 2.7 million East Germans had already left in 1961, and an estimated 30,000 left in 1961 alone. This created a scarcity of resources and services. So, faced with opposition from the Western powers and an economic problem at home, Khrushchev rescinded his earlier veto on the erection of a wall that would act as a deterrent. The wall was first proposed by Ulbricht, the leader of East Germany. Its construction began on the evening of August 13, 1961. As most of you are aware by now, the wall was completed on December 4, 1961. Although the Western powers tolerated the construction of the Berlin Wall to avoid a military conflict, tensions reached a peak when US and Soviet tanks faced off at Checkpoint Charlie on October 27, 1961. But no war broke out. In fact, this standoff speaks to a political cartoon.
The political cartoon suggests that both the Western powers and Soviet Union share an overconfidence and complacency. This is demonstrated by the single shared speech bubble stating, "We can always keep on as we are. The other side certainly won't risk a nuclear collision," conveying a sense of irony as it shows that neither side realizes that they are thinking the exact same thing. Secondly, the political cartoon indicates that both the Western powers and the Soviet Union are engaging in a dangerous policy of brinkmanship. This is illustrated by the visual depiction of leaders from both sides on top of massive nuclear missiles.
The Berlin blockade, as a result, failed because Western allies were able to keep their soldiers well supplied due to the Berlin airlift, in which the supplies would be carried over via aircraft. The crisis would then lead to the creation of NATO in 1949, and it also showed how superpowers didn't really want to get into war or conflicts with each other in all-out scale wars.